We've come today to the Dartmoor town of CHAGFORD. As you can see, it's not far from Dartmoor. It's very isolated, very peaceful and quiet. Yet it's not always been just like this. Things have happened here, and today we're looking at two particular incidents in the 17th century. CHAGFORD makes us think of thatch. Lovely thatched house here. Country lanes and hedges. And a very lovely town centre with lovely shops, a lovely atmosphere. Beautiful place. It has a lovely church, St. Michael the Archangel. Within the church there is a stone tablet in the floor with a red rose on it. This red rose is the clue to our story of what happened here in 1641. Let's see what it says. Here lieth Mary, the daughter of Oliver Whiddon, who died the 11th of the 10th October in 1641. And it says, reader, that's me reading this, would know who here is laid. Behold a matron, yet a maid. Mortal maybe took a murderer, Modelt, took a pious heart, Mary for the better part, but lies out weep. I understand that. Perhaps somebody else can read this better than me and translate it. It's a beautiful church. But the story of this poor young woman is not so lovely. October the 11th, 1641, Mary Whiddon was to get wed in this church. Before the wedding, Mary had two lovers. She could only wed one, so one she spurned. The one she spurned was not happy. So on that wedding day, when Mary stood at the altar here and walked along the aisle here, something happened outside the church. Today there's an art exhibition here, and I wonder how many people here have any clue what happened to the bride of October 11th, 1641, after she walked down the aisle like this, the organ probably playing, arm in arm with her new husband, looking to a happy future. I would have thought on that October day, it was a Friday, 1641, there were crowds of people here looking to greet the new bride. Mary was the daughter, as I said in the church, of Oliver and Margaret Whiddon, quite wealthy people who lived in Whiddon Hall. There's an area near here called Whiddon, and the name appears quite often. Anyway, as she came out of the doorway here, arm in arm with her husband. It all ended for her. Suddenly a shot rang out. Mary fell to the floor, more or less where I'm standing, in a pool of blood, dead. Her former lover, so enraged that she had chosen somebody else, shot her. She was dead. We have no record as to who he was. We have no record as to what happened to him afterwards. We also have no record of the name of her husband. But we do know that in her will, she left money to the poor of this area, and she left a gold ring to her mother. Could that have been her wedding ring? But that's not the end of it. There was another strange story in CHAGFORD also in the 17th century, this time on the 8th of February 1643. Poor Mary, our virgin bride, who never was a matron, was killed just before the outbreak of the Civil War. Charles I was on the throne, and the horrors of the Civil War had not yet happened. Yet in our next story of what happened here, the country was at war with itself. We're looking now at the 8th of February 1643, and hardly 100 yards from the same spot. So we're leaving the church now, where poor Mary Widden was murdered 5 minutes after being wed. She was only 32. Dreadful, dreadful. I find it very strange that the murderer apparently was never apprehended. We're now walking down the road to where the next incident happened, which is oddly only about 100 yards from the other one. So now we're outside the Three Crowns public house, which back in the 17th century was called Widden Hall, possibly. And it's here that Sidney Godolphin was shot dead. And we know, according to the records of the time, he was shot dead just about there, at the entrance. I've been told you can see evidence of musket fire on the entrance to the pub. There was a skirmish here, as I said, but I can't see anything obviously that's put down to that. Possibly lots of repairs over the years have made that disappear. What I find amazing is that poor Mary Widden was shot dead at the doorway of the church just there, 1641, and 1643, Sidney Godolphin was shot dead at the doorway just there. It's history like this that makes my imagination roam. All this happened where I'm standing now, and yet how many of the people walking past here have a clue to what happened? Of course, you can't be in a place like this, hidden in the depths of Dartmoor, without having a ghost story. And we have two here. The first ghost story is for poor Mary Widden, our shot bride. And the story is that in 1971, a daughter of the family that lived in Widden Hall, or the house where she was as a youngster, was about to get wed. And all the guests were staying at her house. On the day of this girl's wedding, 1971, one of the male guests was in his room, and he had an apparition in his room of a young girl dressed in period wedding costume. This did not spook the bride, but has caused another little Dartmoor legend to come alive. You may have noticed inside the church there was a red rose on the memory stone, and also that I placed a red rose there also. This is because that from, I suppose, 1971 onwards, brides who get married in this lovely church leave flowers on her grave. And of course there's the other ghost story. As we've already seen, that in the Civil War, this time 1643, 2 years after the poor incident with our bride in the local church here, 8th of February 1643, there was a skirmish in the town in the Civil War. And in the skirmish, Sidney Godolphin, who was once the MP for Helston, was shot dead. And he was shot dead at the entrance to what is now the Three Crowns pub, which back in the day may have been called Whidden Hall. The story is that his ghost walks the pub, particularly in the bishop's room and most of the other rooms. So we have 2 ghost stories for the price of 1 in a very small town. Let's have a look inside and see if we can see any ghosts. And here we are today ordering food where Sidney Godolphin's body would have been brought. The doorway's just on the left here, so he could have easily been brought in here or taken to the other side. Of course, the body was different inside then, but it stirs the imagination as to what history there is just where we're having lunch. The church where Mary got wed is just across the road. You have to wonder the scene in here just afterwards, the talking, the hushed whispers, while people try to understand what had happened on what should have been this lovely happy day. Also, what fascinates me is that the people here at the time may have heard the gunshot when Mary was killed, not to mention the skirmish outside when Sidney was killed. And they'd have looked out of these very windows, in all probability. To me, that brings history down to the inch. And so we say goodbye to CHAGFORD. We hope you found this of interest and we'll see you again. Thank you and goodbye.